Welcome to Whole Life Living TV Network, sponsored by Gideons International, a show that explores simple ways to live life at your highest potential through the latest outstanding topics, advice, and positive news from a healthy, happier, more loving, conscious mindset with internationally known guests and everyday people sharing simple ways to take belief and apply it towards mastering your life and goals. I'm your host, Sherry Gideons. I'm an international speaker, author, and coach worldwide. I'm here to help you and all people clarify what they want in life so that they can win and succeed. If you want to go directly and learn more about our site and our upcoming guests, you can visit wholelifeliving.com. Well, I am pleased to announce our guest today, David Merkatz. David is here with an incredible story about how when life is going smoothly, he made a living as a locksmith in Coconut Creek, Florida. Life, he thought, was pretty good. While there were some trademark issues with his business, he was making a living and enjoying life. That all changed August 2013 when police arrested David Merkatz and two other fellow locksmiths who were wrongly charged with the criminal charges using a name similar to another larger competitor. A name he maintains was legally registered under Florida law. This case was a civil matter that should have been handled in civil court. And we're here today to talk to David about this amazing case and the way that our legal system operates. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So tell us about this incredible story. What happens when you are innocent and the legal system makes it appear like you're guilty and they have all this evidence against you? What happens to you? Tell us about it.
Well, I started my career in New York City, and I moved down to South Florida, where there was absolutely no licensing regulations of any kind for locksmiths. So when I first moved down here, business was handled through the Yellow Pages. And it got very tough because as the years went on, everybody stopped using the Yellow Pages. They started going on Google and using, Googling people, and we had the pay-per-click advertising. Well, that started off at 25 cents, and now it's $25 to $30 a click. So we were paying more and making less. So me and a couple of partners of mine decided, what could we do to drum up some business? We registered some names that were similar to some of the larger competitors in an effort to try to, catch a few jobs that people got confused and stuff like that. Now, while that's something that's not nice to do, we checked with 3 different attorneys before we did it, and they all told us, while that's something that happens every day, it's like an infringement on their name, it's nothing criminal. And we did it. We registered the names in the state of Florida under the Fictitious Name Act. Now, they had the opportunity to say that the names were too close to the other names and reject the application, but they didn't do that. And we did it for 4 or 5 years with about 3 or 4 different companies. And obviously, the people that we were taking the business from were not too happy. They were losing jobs to us.
Right.
But the customers, on the other hand, most of them really didn't care because they got the same product, the same service. They just thought they were calling the other company. And when they found out, most of them weren't angry, actually. They were just thinking that was a great idea, to catch some business. But back in February of 2013, one of the companies we did it for in the town of Palm Beach, Florida, just happens to do the work for all the police department in the town of Palm Beach. So they gave us a call about 10:30 in the morning and said, we need a lock rekeyed. And I have an independent contractor that does that area because it's quite far from Coconut Creek. And I sent him out there. He knocked on the door. They opened up the door and they said, this is the lock we need rekeyed. He took it off the door. He brought it back to his truck and he changed the pins inside the lock so the old keys wouldn't work anymore. When he got done, he had the customer try the keys. Little did he know that it was a sting operation, and it was actually the police that called us. And everything was fine. They actually paid him $135 in cash for the job. And when he got done, he started walking to his truck. They knocked him to the ground and put handcuffs on him and said, you're now under arrest for burglary of an occupied dwelling, grand theft, and impersonation. And that's how the story actually started.
Wow, wow. So what were you actually charged with? I mean, when this all came about?
Well, after he got arrested, about a week later, one of the other independent contractors got a phone call from the same, at that time he was a detective, now he's a lieutenant, he got promoted. He got a call and said, listen, we're conducting an investigation. We'd like you to come up for an interview. And I told the guy, listen, do the interview over the phone, because once you go there, you know, you can't be sure what's going to happen. And he didn't listen to me. And he went up there and did the so-called interview. And he also was arrested and charged with the 3 same charges. Burglary of an occupied dwelling, grand theft, and impersonation. And the interesting part of it is the state attorney has 30 days to file the formal charges. And when they filed the formal charges, the one charge, the impersonation charge, was dropped from both people, both defendants. They just kept the burglary charge. So after that happened, I knew sooner or later that, you know, since we were the ones that put up the website, they were going to come for me. So I contacted an attorney and had him ready. And he called up the detective, and they said he wanted me to come in for an interview also. Well, of course, I declined the interview. And February went by, March went by, April went by, and I didn't hear anything. And in August of 2013, I had a phone call from my attorney, and he says, I have bad news for you. There's a bench warrant for your arrest. They're going to allow you to turn yourself in, which actually I thought was pretty nice, as opposed to, you know, breaking the door down and coming.
Right, just coming and getting you.
So with my legal experience, which I write about in the book, I contacted a bail bondsman, and he was able to find out what the sealed warrant charges were, and he actually was able to find out what the bond was going to be. So I set everything up with a bail bondsman and prepaid all his fees, and then I did a voluntary surrender the following day, but it was all set. So as soon as they post the charges, I was released almost instantly. So I took an arrest, which normally would take 24 to 36 hours, which I actually teach how to do in the book, and I was able to get released within 5.5 hours of the time that I surrendered. And they charged me with organized scheme to defraud, money laundering, and a slew of charges. And of course, it's a scary thing, because the money laundering charge is a second-degree felony, carries a 20-year sentence. The organized scheme to defraud is a third-degree felony, carries a 15-year sentence. And the impersonation charge also, again, they dropped that, which I couldn't understand. That was I thought, the main charge that they were trying to say we were impersonating the other locksmith. So after that happened, you know, that's when the ball gets rolling. That's when you lose nights of sleep. You don't know what you're going to do. And the sad part of it is the way the system works now. Unlike a civil case, that if you win, you can recover your court costs and attorney's fees. In a criminal case, the prosecutors can literally bankrupt you. Because even if the jury comes back and says, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, you still pay for everything. The state doesn't pay for a dime. So that's why most people are pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit, because they run out of money, like I did. I couldn't afford, I had already paid over $100,000 in legal fees. And for me to go to trial, it would have been an additional $35,000. Again, not refundable, win or lose. And my charges, if I was convicted, they would have given me the maximum penalty, 20 years in state prison. So,
so you're saying that you did your due diligence, you know, and you checked into, you know, obviously trademark infringement and all of that prior to, you know, setting this website. I don't know, you know, I think about it, I'm in technology, and I think about, you know, all the websites and web names that I have, you know, that are similar to other companies, you know, that are doing the same type of business. And, you know, you did this due diligence, and they gave you this information and advice, and then you have this case come against you like you're some major criminal.
Oh, I was in the front page of the Sun Sentinel after I surrendered myself. I still have the article, and then they made it like headlines. It was the front page with my picture. And the funny part of it is, if there's any funny part of it is, the detective involved got a promotion. He now is a lieutenant. They spent an 8-month investigation on this case. They hired forensic experts. You would have thought this was a murder case.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Probable cause affidavit. It's not funny because it cost me a fortune and I lost everything, but I had to figure out a way to educate people and to teach them how to, do all these things. So by writing the book about my story, I also teach people how to get out of jail without seeing a judge. So you can get out within 6 to 8 hours. Mm-hmm. Get arrested for minor things, and they don't realize it's a scary thing to be locked up. Now, the interesting part of it was the other 2 people that were arrested, they knew all along there was never a break-in, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
They wanted to teach us a lesson. How dare you use a similar name to our friends and the other people and steal business away? But the way it should have been handled, they should have went to court and got an injunction and said you can't use the name anymore. That's what it normally happens. It happens with cell phones every day. One product comes out and somebody imitates it. So after all was said and done, the other 2 defendants spent over $20,000 in legal fees, and all charges wound up being dismissed, $20,000 each later. Now,
what were they telling you while you were going through this process? I mean, were they creating steps of fear, or, they would feed you with information, maybe create fear and, different emotions that you're going through and reactions of your own behavior to plead guilty? I mean, is that what they wanted you to plead guilty?
Well, see, here's the problem. I did a lot of research on that organized scheme to defraud statute in Florida.
Right.
And it's an interesting statute. It says all they have to do to get a guilty verdict is not prove that anybody got hurt. The customers could have been 100% satisfied. All they have to do is prove in some way that you misrepresented yourself. And I thought to myself, if I'm on the jury and they come with this story that, we stole all this business and the customer thought they were calling this company and they were misrepresented, I could actually be found guilty of that. And then under the Money Laundering Act, if you're found guilty of the count 1, the organized scheme to defraud, you're automatically a money launderer because you made money off an illegal activity. So if they find you guilty of count 1, you're automatically guilty of count 2. And I'm thinking 20 years in state prison because we used a similar name didn't sound like something I wanted to take a risk for. Even though I had it in the back of my mind, I didn't think they'd ever get a conviction. It would have cost me $35,000 and risking 20 years in prison. And they didn't want to drop the charges against me because the effort that was spent in this case for 8 months and taxpayer money, they didn't want to have complete egg on their face. So they offered me a deal down 8 months down the road. They said, if you will pay restitution, there were 150 victims, interestingly enough, they said.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But out of the 150 victims, only 6 came forward. So in other words, 6 were dissatisfied out of 150. And that's only because the other company said in some way we overcharged them, which really is not the business of the police. If one gas station charges one price and one charges the other. So they said, look, if you'll pay restitution, it was around $6,000 to these victims who, by the way, I never met in my life because I wasn't the one who did the job. We'll downfile the charges, all the felonies, to a petty theft misdemeanor with adjudication withheld, which means there'll be no criminal conviction and you'll get a few years of unsupervised probation. And I thought to myself, a petty theft misdemeanor, no risk of prison. And I just decided, you know what, I'll do it. And I reluctantly did the plea.
Oh my God, you know what? And it makes me think too how often this is happening. I mean, this is more likely to happen with the internet the way it is today than people realize. I mean, because, as I mentioned earlier, look at how many similar companies and similar websites, are out there competing for business. And I mean, it makes me think that maybe you have to have exact content or what, but I don't see how they can do this based on what you're sharing with us. I'm going to get it even better for you. Our website, for example, we had one site. I'm just going to use a generic name. The company's name was ABC Lock Shop and Security Center. Our website was ABC Locksmith, okay? And the site looked nothing like the other site, so it wasn't like in a duplicate site. And at the bottom of the page, it gets better. It said, we are not ABC Lock Shop and Security Center. Please click here to be redirected. Now, we had that small. There's no question we had that very tiny in there, like most disclaimers, but it was on the website. And we even had a clickable link to bring you to their site. And they still didn't, they still made it into a criminal case. And it was only because
it's who you know. That one locksmith happened to be friends with the police, and they made it into a major thing. And unfortunately, I ran out of money, or I would have went for a trial. I probably would have taken the chance, because once you plead guilty, it haunts you, because people believe you're guilty. But I figured, pleading guilty to petty theft with a withheld adjudication, you're eligible to have it expunged. So I said, I'm going to do it rather than risking $35,000 more. And there's always a possibility with a jury. You never know with a jury, they could come back with a guilty verdict. And it was a scary thing, So I designed a nice book which teaches people, what I went through. And I have chapters in there that teach you how to get out of jail without seeing a judge, what your rights are, and an interesting concept, why people plead guilty, like me, to crime. It's because of money and fear.
Right. Well, that's what I thought, in the beginning. And it makes me think, too, I mean, the way that they're making it sound was like you stole these people's website, you stole their content, and that you were stealing their business. And it sounds like a whole lot of wasted money and time, on the legal system as well.
Well, what should have happened is they could have gotten a class action lawsuit from the 3 or 4 companies and, an injunction to say that your name is too similar and you got to stop using it. And if they would have, listen, even if they would have called us and said, if this continues, you're going to be arrested, we would have stopped. We had no warnings. Nobody ever called us. We never got a cease and desist order. It just, again, it's not a nice thing what we did, but it goes on every single day. I could tell you.
Why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think that the legal system did not take the time to give you a cease and desist or a warning?
Because the police don't do civil cases. This particular company was friendly, and he probably said, can you do me a favor? It's going to cost me a lot of money to go to court to sue this guy, and we might lose because it's not exact name, it's similar. Can you do something? And he set up this sting, and he was able to convince prosecutors to take this into a major case. And believe me, he scared the life out of the other 2 guys and me, because I'm not even in the locksmith business anymore. I was afraid of it, after something like that. I didn't think, and to this day, I say I didn't do anything wrong. And I don't think they would ever arrest anybody again for doing what I did, because I made, big news when I put out the book and I disclosed everything on what they did. And it was funny because in June of the last year, it became a bestseller on Amazon, only because there has been a lot of, police arrests and hitting people and doing things like that. But it was a very interesting case. It's still talked about today. I mean, it's very common. I get called on millions of radio talk shows all the time because I've helped a lot of people get convictions off their record. I actually have a chapter in the book that teaches you how to seal or expunge a criminal conviction if it's not a violent crime.
Why do you think that, I guess what I read something that you had said, and you said when you win a trial, you still lose. I mean, go through the steps of that and what that was like for you. And I mean, I know you mentioned earlier, about how you don't win really, but share some more about that with us.
Well, because if you go to trial, the first you have to pay, when you give a retainer to an attorney, that doesn't include a trial. It's always a retainer. And if it gets into a trial, they bill $300, $400, $500 an hour. So what happens is you have to pay. Like in my case, I was quoted $35,000 for the trial. Now, if I accepted that, I would have to pay him that. And if the jury came back and said, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, I still lose that extra $35,000. My court costs, my name is cleared, but I can't sue the state of Florida for those legal fees. And that's one of the things I'm trying to change, because everybody knows my case. Mm-hmm. If they knew that winner takes all, like in a civil case, I could have sued the state for all court costs and attorney's fees. Everybody knows they never would have prosecuted this case. This was a vendetta. They prosecuted this case because they wanted to teach us a lesson. And unhappy business owners that we took some business from, and they were able to, get people interested to prosecute the case. But if they knew, the prosecutor knew, that if they lost the case, they'd have to reimburse me and the other 2 people over $200,000 in legal fees, they would have said, take them to court and sue them. But that doesn't work that way. That's why so many people are pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. There's actually an interesting case in my book about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hate that. I hate hearing that because that's, a lot of times you hear these stories with our legal system that people are really unaware of how, I almost think that they're out to make, an example of people to make more money sometimes. And it's hard not to look in that direction. But the more and more you hear about stories like what you're sharing with us, I mean, I think a lot of it is we don't know. We're unconscious of a lot of these things that we need to do prior toward, even purchasing a web name on a domain name these days.
Well, we registered the names, and the state of Florida gave us the certification. And, if they would have said to stop using the name, we would have gladly stopped using the name. We could have taken it to court, and a judge could have said, it's too similar. Even though they registered it, it's an infringement, and we would have stopped using it. But they took it a civil case and made it into a criminal case and cost us, a lot of money, which, put a lot of people out of work and stuff too that were working with us.
So what would you share with people today? I mean, in beginning a process with a business, if you go on the internet and you search if there's another business that's similar to that, I mean, how can you get past that these days? I mean, we're all thinking human beings, and I believe that we live in a consciousness where, there's so many different similar thoughts going on worldwide. How can you step back from that and really, do different things that are not going to get you in a situation similar to yours?
Well, in my case, what could I have done differently? I checked with the attorneys. I registered the names, Florida stamped them, approved, and sent me the paperwork. And we used them for over 5 years. With the only complaints we got were from the other business people that were losing the calls to us because, sometimes we would put a deadbolt in and they would go into the other company's store to make an extra key. And they would say, oh, you did a nice job. And of course, nice job, they lost the job. They were unhappy. And they were telling customers, well, you got to make a police report. And, the police officer that was involved in this case actually went through our checking accounts, and he called customers on the phone and told them to change their locks because we would keep a key to their house. He tried to get people to come forward to go against us so we could build this into a major case. And he did get 6 out of 150 that did. But obviously the other, 100 or so weren't that upset about it. Otherwise, they all would have come forward. They actually thought it was not nice, but it was a good idea to attract business. So, yeah. And it goes on every day. People come out with a product or a service, and somebody comes out with something similar. And as long as we didn't copy the website and trick them, what we did was use a similar name. If your company was ABC Lock Shop and Security, I thought in my head, how many people are going to call 411 and ask for ABC Lock Shop and Security? They'll call up and ask for ABC Locksmith. And that's what they were doing. And they were getting my phone number instead of his. So the people that used 411, which, not a lot of people do, but here and there we got one call from this one and one call from that one. And we got some good jobs out of it. We made money doing it. It was no question. But the customer got an equal or better product. There was no scam or anything like they were making it into a scam. It was just a trademark infringement.
And it's hard to believe that, they actually charged you with people, with a crime that people thought that they had been, that there had been something wrong done against them, versus this particular company. I mean, look at the politicians, look at the legal system in relationship to all these different things that go on with politicians and their link being on a website and stuff like that. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it goes on every day. I don't have that much money. I got singled out. If I had a lot of money, this never would have happened. It would have went to trial. A jury would have been convinced that first of all, there was never a burglary. You open up the door, you let the person in, you pay them for the job. They never had a case against the other two people. Their whole thing on the burglary charge would be that they only opened up the door because they thought they were the other company. But, juries are not stupid. They would have realized that this is just basically two companies fighting over a similar name, and they never would have sent these guys to jail. But if they went for a trial, luckily they dropped all the charges on one, and the other they worked out what's called a pretrial diversion, which means after 12 months the case gets dismissed. They had to do something because they spent so much time and so much manpower. I can't believe the manpower that was invested in a case to get the end result was me. 6 counts of petty theft, misdemeanor adjudication withheld. Front page in the paper, major crime, and they got nothing for it. And the taxpayers are unaware of what was spent on this case in Palm Beach. I eventually will release that information in a few more months when my probation is completely terminated. I'm going to do a whole story on how much money they spent on it, because I hired a private investigator, and it was more than a murder investigation.
Gosh, it sounds like you had to become your own attorney.
Well, I've already had a case against the state of Florida in '89 that I beat him in a landmark decision. But it didn't end there. This is the interesting thing. After the case was over, a year and a half later, I got a call from the Attorney General's office. And they called me in and they started questioning me about the same case. And I said, listen, this case was handled. He said, no, but this is a civil case. And I said, well, do you have any new evidence? And they said, no, it's the same case. So they said, well, you know, we want you to pay a $10,000 fine now for each victim plus $10,000 in attorney's fees. I said, that ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. So 3 months later, they filed an unfair and deceptive trade practice lawsuit against me for the same 6 victims, which they could whistle Dixie because they're never going to see the money.
Right.
It's never going to happen. I filed an answer, and I pretty much told them they had legislation in 2010 that addressed exactly what I did. And the bill died and never got approved. So we have no regulations here in Florida that, you know, guide us on how to advertise and what to do fairly. We never got a letter that said, you know, not to do this, cease and desist. If you think that I'm going to pay twice for the same thing, it's not going to happen. The case is open now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I'm representing myself in that case because I'm not spending any more money. And you know what? Even if they win the case, I wish them a lot of luck trying to collect because I don't have any money to pay them.
You know, and not only that, I mean, okay, so what about all the other states? I mean, are there guidelines not in place in all the other states as well?
Most states do have locksmith legislation, and it actually addresses you can only advertise the name that you use on your license. Mm-hmm. Questioning me, I actually educated them about the law, and I would have been happy to help them. You know, there are a lot of people that are doing a lot worse things, but to try to sue me for the same people to reimburse them again, I just feel it's, even though it's not double jeopardy because one's a civil and one's a criminal, right. It's going to be an interesting case. And I'm not worried about it because it's a civil case, it's not criminal. And even if they win, good luck. They can have a judgment. I'll file Chapter 7. And if it doesn't wipe it out, they can leave the judgment against me because there's no way I'm going to pay them. And I read the law very carefully. The unfair and deceptive trade practices, they're going to have to show a judge that I did this with malice. And also, when the judge sees that I was reimbursed the 6 victims and that I have not been in the business since, it's highly unlikely they're going to fine me the $60,000 for the same thing. Now, if I was still doing it and there were more victims, that's a different story. So that'll be a topic for the next show when we see where the case goes. It's been I filed my answer November 20th, and I haven't heard anything since. So we'll see where that goes. They don't want to let me alone. And the reason is they got mad that I wrote this book. I mean, they were not happy that after the, you know, criminal case, how dare I disclose the names and everything of the officer involved and everything right in the book. It's public record. So, you know, I disclosed all of that, and I guess they got angry about that.
Oh, I love how you're telling this story, though. I love that you know, because I'm a believer from a consciousness way of thinking. And, you know, the clearer you get about, you know, what you have and have not done right or wrong, I believe that there is an effect to every cause. And it sounds like, you know, based on the story that you're telling, that, you know, you're going to be vindicated in the end, period. But not only that, I mean, on a bigger picture, you're out there really having a deep desire to help others through this, and a deep desire, you know, for other people who may be going through similar situations, or even just with the legal system, period, you know, to, you know, share steps in your book about how to, you know, really go through a process like this and then come out, you know, in a positive way? Because it sounds like you have.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. One of the people in my book actually is being released from prison tomorrow. Here in Boca Raton, unfortunately, he was a diabetic, and he was driving. He was going fast. He was going over the speed limit, and he went over a turnpike, a big hill, and he plowed into a car with senior citizens there, and he killed 5 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a sad case. And he was about less than 2 minutes from his house, actually, and he was trying to get his insulin. And, of course, he was speeding. And they charged him with, vehicular homicide. So they offered him a plea of 5 years, and he had never been arrested in his life. And he felt, you know what, this was an accident. I stopped, I wasn't drunk, I was speeding, and he wouldn't take the plea. Well, how dare him not take that plea? He went to court, first-time offender, and he had one of the best attorneys here in Florida, and they found him guilty. And the judge, instead of sentencing him, the guidelines were up to 15 years in prison. Well, they gave him the whole 15 years because he didn't take that plea up there. And he actually appealed it, and he lost the appeal, and he went to jail. I believe it was in 2003. I've been following his case. He's really a nice guy. And he's going to be released tomorrow after spending 12 and a half years in prison, all because he refused to take that plea. I mean, they could have given him the same 5 years. I mean, after all, this was an accident.
Right.
And because right on the same day that happened, there was an accident similar. There was an accident of a pregnant mom was driving, and a woman that just got her driver's license plowed into her and knocked her into the canal, and she drowned. And the baby died, and, she got a suspended license and a $500 fine. So it just shows to show you, it depends on the prosecutor and if they have a thing for you. And he did not want to take that plea. And because he didn't want to spend 5 years in prison, they punish you. And a lot of people don't realize if you don't take the plea, 90% of the time, if it's a felony, they'll give you the maximum penalty. So that's why people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit, because they're scared. If they'll give you probation or they'll give you like 1/3 of the sentence, a lot of people they're scared or they run out of money.
I hate hearing that too, because I watch a lot of these crime shows, on television, and you hear about all these sad stories where people were actually innocent. And, they didn't take the plea and all that because they truly believed that they were innocent and they'd be vindicated during that trial. And obviously, they weren't. And then, you hear these stories where, on appeal, though, they are vindicated, but it's just sad to hear this kind of stuff goes on, around the world.
I feel bad for this guy. He spent, 12 and a half years. Tomorrow's his release date. And, half of his life in prison. And it was a tragic accident, don't get me wrong, but he should be speeding. But I don't think he should have got 15 years in prison. And what a lot of people don't realize is juries are not allowed to know what the possible sentence is. Because in this guy's case, the jury foreman, because when I wrote the book, I gave a lot of information about his case because I wanted to show what happens if you don't take the plea. And the jury foreman, after they sentenced him to 15 years in prison, said had he known that they were going to sentence this man to that kind of jail time, there wouldn't have been a way they would have come back with that conviction. They would have come back with a not guilty verdict. They figured maybe they'll give him, a few years or something, but they felt that was a harsh penalty for an accident. But
why did they do that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think they won't let the jury know, the possible length of sentence?
Because then they're afraid. Because like he said, they would not have given him, they would have found him not guilty because of this. So they don't let the jury know that. So, and that's why the prosecutors will scare you. Well, and they did that to me. They said, if you go to trial and you lose, you are going to be facing 20 years in prison, and we're going to ask for the maximum. And I thought to myself, using a similar name to another company, there isn't a way that I want to risk spending 20 years in state prison. I mean, murderers get out in 15 sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And you know what? They offered me a deal, which I wasn't happy about because I had to plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit. And when I got up there in front of the judge, a lot of people don't realize you have to say, the judge goes through that questionnaire. Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty? Sure, I want to say, Your Honor, no, I'm not. And I'll tell you what, if you let me plead not guilty and you'll give me the same sentence, if I'm found guilty, not guilty by trial or guilty by trial, but I can't say that. So I have to say yes, and it's killing me, but I have to say yes. And unfortunately, it's on your record. And that's why the Attorney General can come after you for this, because you pled guilty. You're the criminal. You said you did it. Even though you didn't do it, you have to admit that you did it. And unfortunately, it's the way the system works, and there's nothing you can do right now.
Have you had communication with this guy that's in your book? And
well,
I mean, during his ordeal at all?
The guy that's getting out of jail tomorrow, no, I haven't. He's getting out tomorrow. He lives right down the street from me, and I really feel bad for him. I mean, again, he did kill 5 people, and it was a tragic accident. But it wasn't that he was drinking and driving. That would have been a different story. It was that he felt himself going into that diabetic state, and he wanted to get home to get the insulin, and he was going probably 70 in a 55, and he went over the hill and he hit the car, and it was a tragedy. It was a big tragedy for everybody. He spent, 12 and a half years. He got 80. He had to do almost 80% of his sentence. And I followed this story because the similar thing happened to the pregnant woman, and they got nothing, no jail time. They didn't even get charged. It's just, what's the difference? Because it was one person and a pregnant person. Because there were 5, they gave them 15 years. I don't know. The system doesn't work in your favor all the time.
Yeah, it makes me think though that, I think that part of your purpose, my purpose, all of that is to bring this awareness to people. And I think that a lot of these experiences sometimes happen. I mean, we look at them as what we would call bad, in the beginning, but ultimately look at what's happened as a result of you. I mean, you've been able to bring awareness to people worldwide. And I mean, now your purpose in a much greater, grander way is to bring a process and steps and ways to think in which people can, fight against these things that sometimes happen in life.
The worst part of it is, what a lot of people don't realize, there was a case here in Florida, mistaken identity. A guy got charged with armed kidnapping and rape. And they held him in jail 60 days, refused to do a DNA sample, till they finally got himself an attorney, spent, maybe $10,000 on attorney's fees. And the case was ultimately dismissed. They caught the guy. Now, when you look up this guy, it says armed kidnapping and rape, case dismissed. That's on his record. Most people think bad of you, even though the case was dismissed. In the back of their mind, let him try to get a job in a childcare place or something. They're going to look it up and they're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to hire you, even though the case was dismissed. Well, he happens to be lucky because he lives in Florida. And under Florida law, if a case is dismissed, or like in my case, adjudication withheld, there's avenues to have it expunged from the record. So I can teach people how to do that. I have examples in the book. But if you happen to live in a state like New York, they're a non-expungement state. So it will be on your record forever. Armed kidnapping and rape, case dismissed. It's all over the internet. Your name is destroyed, like mine is. My name is destroyed on the internet because it has all the bad, very little of the good, except for my book, but it has a lot of bad on there. And it's, they don't correct anything. So between the news reporters and Google, it really wrecked my reputation. Luckily, I wrote the book, which helped. But, people get charged all the time with crimes they didn't commit. And even if they're found not guilty, if it's a serious charge like that, it's on their record and it stays with you. And, when you go to get a job, if it's a state job or a government job, they can't use it against you because it's dismissed. But a small private employer tends to think differently when they see that on somebody's record. So,
well, and not only that, because everything, in any company now, I mean, I'm realizing down to the smallest company like McDonald's does background checks now. And if you had any crime, misdemeanor, I mean, I don't know if it's a misdemeanor, but I definitely know it's a felony, they won't hire you. They won't even look at you.
Right. Now, in Florida, if you have adjudication withheld, technically you're not convicted. And technically you can have any license you want if it's a withheld adjudication. So, but a lot of states don't honor that, But like in Florida, I have my case is adjudication withheld, and it is a misdemeanor anyway. So most people wouldn't consider that as a major thing, a petty thing.
What is adjudication withheld? What does that actually mean?
Formal conviction is not on your record. So technically, if I applied for a gun license, if adjudication is withheld, I can actually, even if it was a felony conviction, I can actually get the gun license because the conviction is withheld. So you don't have a conviction on your record. can help you with your license. That's why if you live in a state where they withhold adjudication and you're a first-time offender, that will allow you to get a license to carry a gun or to get a real estate license, because technically you weren't in, even pled guilty when they withhold adjudication, it means you're not guilty. It doesn't mean you're not guilty, but it means they can't use it against you. And in Florida, if it's withheld adjudication and you've never been convicted of a crime anywhere else, you can file to have it sealed or expunged, and then you can lawfully deny that you were even ever arrested. It'll be removed from all the records. So that's why I tell people, if you can get it withheld, like I did, and take the plea, when it's all said and done, I can have that removed from the record completely. It'll be expunged. So.
Oh, that's great information to know. So, David, how do we stop this? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again?
It's a very simple thing. It's not going to happen in the near future. Treat all criminal cases the same as civil cases. If you sue me or I sue you and you win, you can ask for all court costs and attorney's fees. Well, if that was a criminal case, prosecutors would think twice if the evidence was spotty. If, like in my case, they knew this was a mark infringement case. They knew that the chance of getting conviction was very low, but they also knew we can cost these people $100,000, maybe take a mortgage on their home, and they'll never do it again. So they can do that. Had they known that the laws were different, like in a civil case, and I went to trial and they lost, and I could come after them and say the jury awards you all court costs, attorneys' fees, and bond fees, it's supposed to be $2,000 in bond fees, they wouldn't file the case. So cases that they had very little evidence on, if they knew that they had to reimburse, like in a civil case, should be the same thing, they wouldn't arrest people unless they had strong evidence. They would make sure that it wasn't, just circumstantial, or they want to teach somebody a lesson. And that's what solved the problem.
So if a legal issue had happened to an individual, or they were going through something similar to this, what would you share with them would be the first step right now? What was the first step they be to go through this process?
Well, I always tell everybody, and people laugh at me, you should always have a bail bondsman's card. Just like, you never know, you can get pulled over. I had a friend that got pulled over for a traffic ticket, and years ago, before it happened, he got pulled over and he was court ordered to go to driving school. And he did. And back then, computers weren't as popular. So they filled out a slip, he mailed it in. They never put it in the system. So as far as the court knew, he didn't comply. And because he didn't comply, they suspended his license. So when he got pulled over for the second ticket, they put handcuffs on him. He didn't know what to do. How do I get out of jail? What do I do? So, he called me and I said, well, it's a misdemeanor, I'll probably get an ROR or a $100 bond. But a lot of people are scared. They don't know what to do. They don't know that you can't make a phone call when you're arrested. No phone calls are allowed when you're arrested. The only time you're allowed to make a phone call is after the charge, which can be 16 to 18 hours later after you're booked. So bail bondsman card, most important, memorize their number, because a bail bondsman today can electronically, if it's a minor crime under $10,000, they'll take you on a signature over the phone. They can electronically bond you out in minutes, where if you have to have a family member, they have to go to their money down, takes 7 hours before it gets into the system. So that's how I worked the system with my bail bondsman. He was able to have it ready, and as soon as the charges were read, all the paperwork was done. He pressed the button, and within minutes, it showed up bonded out, and then it took a half hour to get processed out. I mean, I actually got out in record time, 5.5 hours.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
It's unheard of. But if you know how to handle yourself and how to take care of it, you can, unless it's a violent crime, of course it's a rape or murder, and we're talking about white collar crime, you can pretty much get out within 5 to 8 hours as opposed to 36 hours. And you have to know how to do those things, and I teach that.
So you mentioned earlier that you're no longer in the locksmith business. So are you teaching classes or courses on how to handle, people to handle themselves legally, or workshops that, go through the steps?
You can't really do that legally, but because I don't want to get arrested for acting an attorney without a license. But people call me and I tell them, I refer them or I give them my opinion, but I can't give advice because otherwise we'll be practicing a license and get requested for that. But I'm possibly going to write a second book on the subject too, with more details. I learned a lot more on the system. And I also have a chapter in the book on traffic stops, what to say, how to get it, how I got pulled over 10 times and never received one ticket. Politeness.
I love it. Politeness. Like, so what are you doing now besides your book? I mean, are you just primarily promoting your book as far as work goes?
Because, actually, I have 3 months left on the probation, and I know they're watching me like a hawk. So I basically don't want to put myself in the spotlight and back in any type of business until that's terminated. And then I'm going to probably release more information about my case and how much money they spent and how the taxpayers got hosed for a lot of money that they're not aware of for this case. And eventually I'll go back into another trade, but I just wanted to lay low for another few months. This is over with, and, promote the book. And it's fun. I like helping other people. Really fun. You run into people get scared when they get arrested and they don't know what to do.
Well, I give you such credit for creating awareness. I mean, it makes me think of my own story, just it's all about creating awareness and helping other people to, step into an extraordinary life, sometimes based on some of the experiences that you and I have overcome.
Right.
And I just give you such amazing credit for, putting forth this awareness, towards others and overcoming all this.
Yeah, I try to help other people. A lot of people aren't aware, what to do when they get arrested. It's a scary thought. They don't know how to find out. They don't know that if the charges are withheld, you can have it removed from your record. Or they don't realize if you don't take the plea, what kind of you're facing. And there are some cases it just doesn't pay to take the plea. Like in my case, to plead guilty, even though it's not the right thing I felt to do, but to plead guilty to that withheld or go to trial, it wasn't much of a thought because I figured, let this case be over with. I can move on. I can write my book. And all right, so I pled guilty to a misdemeanor and it's withheld. So, or what if the jury came back and said, we find you guilty? 20 years in state prison is a scary thing over something that's nobody really got hurt. A business owner lost money because I used a similar name. I don't think that deserves to spend the same amount of time in prison as somebody that kills somebody. So I didn't want to take the risk. And a lot of times people do take the risk, like the guy in Boca, and 12 and a half years he's going to be 60 years old soon. He went in jail when he was like 47, the prime of his life. He spent in jail, and I'm sure he thinks about it every day. He didn't think he did anything that was wrong. He thinks, it was an accident. And the way they prosecuted it, and because there was a lot of media attention to the case, like in my case, I was afraid also. Case drew front page of the newspaper. So I figured if I can get a misdemeanor, petty theft, it was worth, doing that. And that's why unfortunately, I had to take the plea.
Well, David, I've just really enjoyed, knowing more about this particular topic. And I mean, I really encourage all of you viewers and listeners to read David's book. I've included on the message window here a link to David's book where you can purchase it on Amazon. But David, why don't you go ahead and share with us other ways that people can connect with you, talk to you, and share your website and any other information that you'd like to share with our guests.
Okay. Well, I have a toll-free number, 1-844-WRONGLY, if anyone needs to reach me, if I can help them. The website is www.wronglycharged.com. The email address is wronglycharged@hotmail.com. The book is available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Books A Million. The print version is $17.99, and the paperback is $8.99. And even if you download the ebook, you can get all the information if you don't want the paperback. But the paperback has, it's a nice version, and it's a good handy book. It gives you a lot of information in there.
Great. I included the number on there as well, 1-844-WRONGLY. And I want to thank you again so much for sharing this awareness with us and really getting this message out. I mean, I think that just listening to your story, I feel that from my heart that you're going to go on to do really amazing things to, help people through different areas of their life.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank all of you viewers and listeners for joining in on the Whole Life Living Show. I'm Sherry Gideons, your host. I am an international speaker, author, and coach worldwide, helping people to clarify what they want in life so that they can win and succeed. You can join our weekly schedule or be a guest on the show by visiting wholelifeliving.com, and you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter. Once again, thank you so much for joining us this week on the Whole Life Living Show. See you next week. Bye, David.
All right.